Hello everybody, this is my second video for today. I made one earlier on, but I think it was a bit too long, like 33 minutes, which I don't think is a good idea, so I'm gonna summarize this as much as I can. So basically, Baldur's Gate 3 came out, and it's a hit with gamers, basically, and everybody is basically praising the game, and one of the reasons for that is because it is a full-fledged game that doesn't need a day one patch. It's got some, obviously, features, some obviously got some features in there that fans have been wanting for a long time. But aside from that, the quality of the game itself, or the build of the game, is something which fans seem to be quite happy with. In fact, it takes you back to the days of PS2 games, whereby if a game launched broken, usually that company's reputation took a significant dive, and they couldn't really patch the game. So what they would do is they would ensure that things like quality assurance or quality control was obviously done as much as possible before the launch of the game. So when they gave you the game, it was complete on disc. You could play it from start to end. 99% of the time, the games were okay and perfectly fine. Nowadays, I would say it's not an official stat, but I'd say at least 50% of the games that you buy at launch need some sort of day one patch or have bugs and errors in it. Some of them are just downright unplayable and unenjoyable. Baldur's Gate, on the other hand, or Baldur's Gate 3, seems to be the opposite. It's almost as if, though, the developers wanted to exercise a duty and care to the point, or to the point where gamers themselves would feel like they've gotten a quality product that they've paid for. And now we have Western developers who claim that this is an anomaly and not the standard. Now, the thing about this is, though, is as far as it goes with any product that you buy, when you pay for that product, you want to get the best out of it. You want it to be, and obviously depending on how much you pay for, the quality will differ. So for example, an indie game that's not going to be as expensive as a AAA game, but with an indie game you sort of know what you're going to get. Usually, especially with the ones that have been made lately, and on sites, if you go to like Indie Gala and even other games like Hades, for example, it was an indie title when it first started off. Now I think it's probably grown. I don't know if the studio has grown, but the title was still an indie game at the time. When you think about it, these short bursts of games that are so beautiful and so masterfully created, so much of time and effort has been put into these experiences, even though you can't get 100 hours out of it. In some cases, you can get about 4 or 5, and sometimes up to 10 hours, depending on the game that you're playing. But they're so enjoyable, so fun, and it feels like developers and or gamers rather made these games, even though they're developers themselves. Whereas with a lot of these Western game developers, my opinion of them is that they don't really care what happens to a game when it's released. What's important to them is making those sales, getting the bottom line going, and then they eventually will patch it up because they're going to sell you a season pass or a battle pass, or they're going to integrate some sort of in-game store which is going to force you to buy goods at every corner. As much as they'll say it's cosmetic, they'll eventually sell you other mechanics in games like Modern Warfare. I'm sorry, not Modern Warfare. Yes, Modern Warfare. A lot of free-to-play titles, in fact, do that to you. They get you hooked onto the game. They give you a store. They tell you it's cosmetic at first, and in some cases, they sell you advantages here and there, which has basically become pay to win. Now, with Baldur's Gate, from what I understand, it doesn't have any of those things. The developers themselves obviously put a lot of effort into the game itself, and they made sure that it was working out the gate when it was released. Now, it was obviously in early access for apparently a number of years, 3 years or so. And there are a few things to take away from this article, which I think is important. So yeah, I'm going to leave some, I'm going to read some tweets on now X. Like, what do we call tweets now? Is it still tweets or is it just like X's? Do we call like messages on X's? I don't know. Or crosses? I don't know. So just this paragraph over here. So, sorry. Here we go. However, this excitement was not shared by Larian Studios' peers, as in weeks leading up to the release of Baldur's Gate 3, a number of Western game devs, clearly aware that the game had a substance to support its surrounding hype, responded to the studio's accomplishment with panic. Interesting. The discontent was first brought by widespread attention of El Paso, elsewhere, and space warlord organ trading simulator developer Zalavia Nelson Jr. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. who on the 7th tweeted, a lot of people, I'm deeply excited about what the lovely folks at Larian accomplished with Baldur's Gate 3. But I want to gently preemptively push back against players taking that excitement and using it to apply criticism or raise standard to RPGs going forward. Now, here's the thing. It's not a raised standard towards RPGs or to RPGs. In fact, it's not even a raised standard. Standards have slipped and fallen so far down that it needs to get back to where it used to be. This raised standard that he's referring to, it's not a raised standard. Releasing a quality working product, releasing a full-fledged game that's not trying to constantly reach into your pockets, it's not trying to push you something that you don't want to buy or don't want to spend money on or don't need, or that should have been in the game in the first place, shouldn't have been ripped out and sold to you separately. That is not raising standards. That is just how the games used to be made. Obviously, all these other new tactics and also things like day one patches have caused gaming as a whole, in my opinion, the standard of gaming to significantly drop. In my opinion, I know that developers are obviously strapped for time. You hear about how they work in these extreme conditions, in some cases with buildings that are open for 24 hours a day, and they're working excessive shifts and they're just getting abused left, right, and center. I get that when it comes down to game devs. But also a lot of these companies that have taken, or somehow, or rather these finance bros who have taken over all these companies, effectively just look at it as another way of making profit out of thin air. The idea is to basically put in as little money as possible, make sure a game launches when it was supposed to launch. And the key thing about a game that launches, it just needs to boot. It doesn't need to do anything else. It just needs to get you past the start menu, into the game, and allow you to play. It just needs to boot up that first level. The rest of it doesn't really matter to most of these people, because the game doesn't have to be fully functioning. They can patch it later. You've already given them your money and you can't really get it back in most cases. So that's what a lot of Western game developers rely on, in my opinion. Now I'm going to go back to this article and see over here. One of the things that he pointed out as far as being part of the success of this game was the dev cycle stretching back to 2017, so it had a reasonable development cycle. It wasn't something that was done in a period of 12 months or 24 months and just like crammed together and slapped out and spat at you. Right, 2 massive games in the definitive editions worth of tech and institutional knowledge to draw from. So basically, they had people who had a good working cycle for the game and people who had the expertise to make this game good. Okay. Super successful early access period lasting 3 years. Okay, so it's been an early access for 3 years. In that time, people could give feedback, quality issue, bug hunting, and cash flow. So basically, with the game being in early access, they were able to secure funding to address things related to quality control and also get feedback from the actual people who play the game. So they can tell you what was wrong with it or what they've encountered. And bug hunting. That's the most important thing over here. Bug hunting, looking for faults with the game, things that can break the experience or take you out of it. A lot of Western game developers, my opinion about it is quite simple. I believe they have zero quality assurance internally. I believe that, I'm being honest with you, I genuinely believe that they've just got a small set of guys who are out there just to make sure that there is a build of the game that is working, in the sense that it boots up, you can play the game, but it doesn't matter if the game is broken or not. Quality assurance, in my opinion, in this day and age, is done by people like you and I. It's done by gamers. We are the people who buy these games and then tell them, hey, look, it's unplayable because of A, B, C, and D. This is the problem I've encountered. I've got a level 99 weapon, but it does the same amount of damage as a level 1 weapon. What's going on? You know, I'm running and somehow enemies are able to attack me through walls where I'm supposed to be taking cover or whatever it is. I'm not trying to say that these things are prevalent in all games, but generally what I believe is, in my opinion, and my own personal view, is that the players have become the quality assurance or the testers for these games. And in order to do that, in most cases, you've got to buy the game at launch and then deal with a broken product which you've just got to fuss about. And then game developers just expect you to keep quiet and accept things because that's just the way it is. No, it's not. The standards have dropped. And now that the standards have been, so now that they've given us a taste of what standards used to be like, Western developers are pushing back against that. That's my opinion about it. Over 400 developers in 7 different offices. What did you expect from a big game? What do you expect from a huge title? 20 people to be working on it. No. They've got the resources to do it. They've got the people to do it. They've got the people with the proper skills. They've got, obviously, the workspace, the hands that they need to build this. Games have gotten more complex over the years. They're not going to get simpler unless you're looking for games like I'm going to go again. If it's simpler, you go and you play an indie game. Those things are so beautiful and so amazing. I've always been a AAA player for as long as I can remember. But after the decline of the AAA gaming industry and all of this really, really terrible practices with day one patches and endless season passes and battle passes and in-game stores, I started playing indie games. I can tell you, they give you that joy that you will, that just, I don't know how to explain it. It makes you fall in love with gaming all over again. Whereas AAA games, in most cases, when you put it on, you get this sour taste in your mouth, and you just probably want to use the disc as a coaster if you've bought a physical edition. The licensed brand and the world of one of the largest entertainment IPs in the world, D&D. I'm not even a D&D fan. I don't know anything related to Dungeons and Dragons beyond its name. I've played Magic the Gathering. I don't know if that's related to Dungeons and Dragons. I've got Dungeon Siege. I don't know if that's related to Dungeons and Dragons. And Dungeon Siege as well. I played like 5 minutes of it, so I don't even know what it's about, even though I've got all of them. But I can still see why I would personally get behind Baldur's Gate 3 because of the standard that it has shown you, or rather, the return to a normal standard from what has been, well, falling rapidly thanks to AAA game developers, or rather finance bros taking over these AAA game developing companies or developers themselves. This is a small incomplete list. Laren is coming into the game swinging with a gigantic weight of expectation to deal with, but they're also doing it with an immense amount of wind. This is insane. So what he's saying is basically you've got a big studio who's got the manpower, they've got the skills, they've got the resources, they've got the feedback, all of the things that are basically like the foundations of making a video game. They have all of these things. They've managed it effectively and efficiently. They've put out a quality product, because that's what games are, whether you like it or not. It is a product that's now being sold to the public or gamers. And he's basically saying like, okay, cool, this is an incomplete list of why you shouldn't expect this out of companies. No, I think that's absolute crap. If you are buying a game from Bethesda, that game shouldn't be buggy, broken. It shouldn't be a complete mess. You shouldn't be buying a game, for example, like Fallout 76 at launch, paying the price you did for it, and then having to experience exactly how bad the game actually is, and then having to deal with endless amounts of patches. That shouldn't be the norm. That's not the standard. That's below standard. And for too long, gamers have been forced to accept below standard. I say no more to that. We are done with that. You return back to the days where you gave us a working product, regardless of the genre. It doesn't have to be an RPG. It could be even a first-person shooter. It could be an adventure game. Doesn't matter what it is. It could be a fighting game. When you release it, do not release it in the state as Street Fighter V. Street Fighter 6 learned their lesson. I mean, the way they released that game compared to Street Fighter 5, it's absolutely insane. And that in itself also shows you where the standards were for Street Fighter 5. They were far below standard. And then Capcom realized that. So when they came out with Street Fighter 6, they went a bit wild with some of the advertising. But the fact of the matter is, they not just got back to baseline, they went a bit higher than baseline as far as standard is concerned. Oh, there we go. I keep seeing baseline. It's in here somewhere. This is not the baseline, the new baseline for RPG. This is an anomaly, he argued. No. What we're trying to say is you don't have to build a game that's like this, exactly like this. What we're saying is if you're going to put a game out there, make sure that it is complete, it works, and it shouldn't be digging into people's pockets for more money unless it's completely and entirely optional. For example, you have like an armor set that you decide to make, which you think would be cool. You add it in as DLC. Fine. But all these limited time events where you can get exclusive certain items, otherwise you've got to pay for it or you got to deal with battle passes. Those things I believe need to die and fade away. In-game shops with which require real-world money converted into digital currency for these games, I think those things should also die as well. Excuse me. That is just my opinion. If they go big or bigger with their next title, Larian themselves could die. That's the thing. Like I said, we're not expecting the same game to be released all the time with something bigger than that. Yes, when Baldur's Gate 4 does come out, the bar has been set, and they need to get higher than that bar. But by the time they do that, they would in all likelihood have better technology, would have improved on their skills, developed better techniques, maybe programming or game development that not only speed up the process, but help to streamline it to be more effective, efficient, and overall put out a quality product. So I'm just going to skim further down this article. There is something else that I saw over here which I thought was interesting. So, but if you want to shout that every RPG should be like this going forward, you have no excuse. Oh, so please celebrate the achievement represented by Baldur's Gate 3. It looks like a massive amount of effort is about to pay off in a big way. That's right, a massive amount of effort. When you release a broken game, it comes off as you didn't put the effort in. You just released it to get people's money, and then now you're hoping that you don't get some blowback from that. For one of the brightest voices in the medium, but if you shout that every RPG should be like this going forward, you have no excuse. You've just missed the point. You've created expectations and conditions to ensure your favorite creators may never be able to give you the thing you love ever again. I think that's absolute nonsense, because if you want something, I don't care how bad of a game it is. Like if you look at the Final Fantasy Pixel remasters, those games are pretty old. They're ancient. I mean, Final Fantasy 1 came out before I was even born, and I haven't played it as yet. I do own a copy of the game somewhere here in my room. I'll find it. And if you released a broken game like Final Fantasy 1, for example, 30 years ago, Square Enix would have definitely gone under. They put a whole lot of care into it. They obviously made sure the game itself was fun and something enjoyable, and that saved their company. And that obviously was done with what was supposed to be the baseline standard for all video games, in the sense that you release a quality product that is not a complete disaster at launch and not trying to fleece you out of extra money while being broken. It doesn't have always online features, and they're still good to play. Now that's a game from like more than 30 years ago. Now let's go back to what we have today. Following the conclusion of this thread, Nelson Jr.'s cautionary would receive an outpouring of support from Western devs. You're absolutely right, said Diablo 4. Diablo 4. Senior designer Chris Balzer. Even if you look at one of Ving's touchstones, Ultima 7, that's a game that had 12 years of prior games feeding into it. If you look at this as a new benchmark, then we would need to focus on creating conditions just like with TOTK. Oh, Totk, the ring. But what is TOTK? I can't remember. Sorry, it's late. Brain's burnt out. But people too often only look at the fruits of this labor, not the labor itself. Wrong. We know, most gamers know, gamers that have money, that is. When I say gamers that have money, I'm usually referring to people who go out, they work and buy the games for themselves. A lot of kids get games as gifts, so they ask their parents. They are gamers at the end of the day. I mean, I was at that point in my life at one stage, and I won't forget the things that my parents did for me, especially my dad. He used to take me to these stores to buy these demo discs for like the PlayStation 1, because the full games were like just so expensive, and the demos, I used to play them forever. I won't forget that. Anyway, same deal with people wondering why there are so few artists painting like Renaissance masters. Good work takes a lot of time, takes a lot of effort, takes a lot of skill, and it often doesn't just become a hit overnight or an overnight sensation. Sometimes it takes a bit of time, but make no mistake, that quality is recognized. People do eventually open their eyes to it. I would not be surprised if this was a more dev effort than the next 2 or 3 games in the genre combined, opined Xbox senior programmer James Berg. It's Rockstar level nonsense for scope. Only a few studios could even try this. I can't wait to play it, but this kind of effort will likely not be replicated this decade. That's the thing. We're not asking you to make another Baldur's Gate 3. What we're asking for you to do is to actually release the game in proportion to what it's worth at launch. So if you're asking $70, that game better be working from start to end without any issues. There shouldn't be any need to buy extras. There shouldn't be any need for you to send out day one patches that are bigger than the disc which the game was printed on. Great thread, Prez, Fallout New Vegas director. Fallout New Vegas, beautiful game, very nice. Played it a few years ago. I got a physical copy of it here recently. Obviously, though, it's kind of useless to most people except for myself, because once you input the key into Steam, the disc is basically useless unless you've got a disc drive, which ironically I've got. I like my old physical games. The conditions under which BG3 was made are atypical. This is in no way a slight against the game or the people working on it, who clearly are passionate and talented. Having the foundation set and funding, and the foundation set and the funding to build things on your own terms is invaluable. And that's it. That's the whole thing. Having a good foundation. So you have good practices as far as developing goes. You've got the skills, you've got the hands, you've got the time. And most importantly, you have the budget. The budget, obviously, that comes from your company. In most cases, you can obviously do things like Kickstarter campaigns, or you can even do early access as well, which is what this game did, and it became quite successful for that. Now, the thing about all of this is that these people are not so much upset in terms of the game itself. They're more upset about the reaction to the game, in the sense that now that gamers have gotten a taste of what things used to be like, they now remember just how good gaming was at some point in time. And now that we know it's capable, studios are capable of giving us the games in a working state, a game that is not broken, that does not require excessive amount of patches within its first launch week or whatever it is to get up and running, these guys are salty. I can tell you this because my opinion about Western game developers is that majority of the time, these companies are unfortunately run by finance bros who want games just to be shoved out there with in-game stores that just reach into your pockets for as long and as deep as they possibly can to rip out your soul from you if they could. That's my opinion about them. It's not really developers that really do these things, but rather the people who are in charge of the developers forcing these ideas and ideology on them. And then what happens is we end up with a broken game because they spent more time trying to get the in-game shop working instead of actually polishing up the game. I also believe that quality assurance is dead at these companies, and that we, the gamers, are the quality assurance. That skill or that duty has been passed off onto us so that we can then give them feedback and tell them what's wrong, what's broken, what we don't like, what makes us unhappy, and what can be done to fix the game. All the while, we've already given them our money. That's what I believe, that's what I honestly believe when it comes down to Western developers. And it's also why they're always so salty when studios do these things internally, because they know that they don't want to be held by that same standard. They know that if this is the standard going on, let's just say from Japanese game developers with every single game, I can guarantee you now, gamers are going to probably just ignore Western developers. They're just going to fall through the floor along with their standards. And when that does happen, and when it does get so far out of control, that's when they'll come back begging and telling us, look, we've done it. We are now at baseline. We are now at what things are supposed to be like instead of what things are, or just the way it is. Rather, players are hoping that the game ushers a new standard of quality control. And there we go. Quality control medium-wide, particularly amongst bigger studios such as Bethesda, Fallout 76, Ubisoft, Assassin's Creed, whose titles in recent years, despite having massively inflated, have steadily trended towards being more buggy, broken, borderline unplayable than one would ever expect from retail releases. And there you have it. That is what we're all talking about. It's not that we want you to make a BG3. It's not that we want you to put that amount of features into a video game. We want you to actually give us something that is worth the money that you are asking for. If you're asking $10, fine, give us $10 worth of crap. But if you're asking for $70, that thing better be in pristine condition when it gets to us, and it better be in good working order all the way till the end of the game. Essentially, not all video games need to be genre defining. And there we go. That's it in their production. But for goodness sake, at least release them in a working state. And that's the point of this whole thing. That's the hill I'm going to die on, because not all games need to be genre defining. No, I'm not looking for every game to be a Resident Evil 4. But at the same time, what I am looking for is that if I give you my money, give me a game that I can 20 years from now fire up without any issues. And if there are issues, let them be minor, inconsequential, and something that can be overlooked without having to be patched. With that being said, I'm out of this video. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, leave a like. If you didn't, leave a dislike. Comment down below on what do you think about the state of gaming, and what do you think about Western developers and how they're behaving towards, obviously, Baldur's Gate 3, and how they're trying to paint it as an anomaly. Whereas all we're asking for is give us good working games when you take our good hard-earned money. That's the end of the video. Hope to see you in the next one. Take care of yourselves. Until then, have a good day. Goodbye.